we're gonna do today. I did not skip ahead to where I wanted to in the video because we got talking about things. Oh, hobby card. I was worried you would be worried. I guess because you were running late. I took care of the lights, so you're good. All right. Anyway, we're gonna talk about all kinds of things. We're gonna do it as quickly as we can before we get to the movie. One of those things was actually brought up right before class. Isn't that how that always works? To the best of your ability, Rory, if you could help us out. Any and everything you were trying to say. Yeah, you got it.
I watched this movie and I didn't know how it was going to relate to the class at
Okay.
first.
Okay.
So I was kind of confused about that part.
Okay. That's most of it. Well, you said you watched the video and it helped. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Is there like one or two things you could?
Well, just like simply in the video, you pointed out specific things that like related to the masculinity.
Yeah.
And I know we've been talking about that all year long.
Yeah.
So I guess when I thought of masculinity, I was like watching this movie. I was like, I mean, he's like fighting like that shows like and he's pop and whatnot, but it just pointed out more specific things and how we're going to be able to write about it.
Okay. Well, yeah. So like, I want to do this for two reasons. Number one, a bit of a commercial for the video, which you guys should watch if you have not. Today will be harder for you and harder for me, which bums me out. But yeah, I mean, the gist of it is we have a guy. This movie is in 1988, by the way. It's 2 years younger than me, right? To give you an idea of how long ago this was. So this is a movie many of your parents might have seen back when it came out. It's that kind of old. But as a result of that, it reflects that world, right? Some of the things in the movie maybe would not have happened in a film in 2022, nor should we expect that sort of thing. Like, any art is made by the culture that makes it, right? So in a lot of ways, the anxiety some of these characters have, the motivations some of these characters had. I made a joke because I just picked a spot to test the audio. In this scene, we are 4 minutes into the movie. Holly has just told her pregnant secretary to go get a drink. And you're like, what? 80s, man.
So that everybody's scared of Germans back in the 80s.
Yeah. And because you had that World War II memory. And yeah, but this is just, fuck it, maybe it'll be fine. It's like, I don't know that that's true. But in the 80s, that's how they felt. So, but the point is, the question we're always trying to answer, this is true of all of our papers, but it's very true of papers 1 and 3, okay? The question we're always trying to answer, what does this, in this case movie, say about us as a people, a society, a culture? A lot of it's going to relate to 2022 because this stuff doesn't just go away, but what we're really talking about, what does it say about us as a people, a society, a culture in 1988, okay? Because that's when it was made. The people that went to see it, the people that wrote it, directed it, starred it, they all existed in that time and place. That's kind of, so it's like a time capsule in a way. That's how texts work. Okay? To that end, I'm gonna do my damnedest in like the next 4 minutes to sum up the video, which you guys should watch. I think it would help a lot. Mainly, we have a main character, John McClane, who's not currently on screen. That would have been convenient of me. He runs around the whole movie in a tank top. He shoots bad guys in the face and kind of laughs about it, like not in a sadistic way, but in a like, haha, sort of I'm a man type of way that we've talked about, very stereotypical. Yes, sir?
And nothing else again.
Oh, okay. I'll allow it. This time. But you also, and I stress this a lot in the aforementioned video, I'll stop patting myself on the back for that. One of the real takeaways from the class we would have had that I just hopefully had you watch a recording of, McClane is deeply uncomfortable. The first shot of the movie, it's a plane coming in, and then we get to McClane's hand on the armrest in the chair, and he's like gripping it like he's trying to tear it off because he's scared to fly, right? He's deeply uncomfortable with LA, deeply uncomfortable with the whole idea of California. He actually vocalizes this several times. California, he says it like that with some stank on it. So There's something about who this guy is, what he represents, and how it very clearly does not fit into anything that he's about to encounter, right? And he makes that known in a lot of ways that are somewhat apparent, but then it gets super obvious once he actually gets here. We're not going to watch this scene today, but there's a moment he walks into the office party, the Christmas party. He does not belong. It is very clear from the jump. He's walking around. He kind of looks like an upscale hobo, I would describe his mode of dress, right? Everybody else is very LA, very California. You know, we have those kind of stereotypes. At one point, a guy walks up and kisses him on the cheek, and he's like, what the fuck is going on? Yeah. But that's the whole movie. And I want to, if nothing else, I kind of want that stuff in the back of your mind when we'll talk about today. Because we're actually going to deal today, at least to begin with Holly, his wife. She's in the background here. You can't really see her very well. She's a powerful figure. She's in charge of all kinds of folks at the company. She's not the number one person, but the number one person gets shot in the face about 10 minutes in. So she becomes the number one person by default. And a lot of the things I just brought up to you about McClane, about his kind of worldview and things he's going to have to deal with as a result of that, come into conflict with Holly and her worldview. And they're actually going to talk about that in the scene we're going to look at. And you're going to get to watch me struggle here for a second. So this is right before the scene we're going to look at. The bad guys are kind of rolling up very ominously. The scene we're about to watch. McClane has finally found Holly. They are in her pretty swanky office. She has a bathroom in her office. That to me smacks of luxury, to be quite honest with you, in a stupid way. But they are going to talk about, I'm going to go ahead and say some very clear marital issues they have. Again, one last sort of remark upon the video that hopefully you watched that I know some of you didn't. At this point in the film, you as an audience member have been notified that maybe their marriage isn't great. He's been in New York for like the past 6 months, I think it is. She's been in LA, so it's a long distance thing. Those don't ever work out. Some of you are trying that right now. It's a mistake, I'm just letting you know. But, funny story, I'm not going to tell you about that, but it doesn't work out. The other thing though, he gets to the building, he's trying to look up his wife on this computer, he types in McClane, her name doesn't come up. That's weird, she works here. And then he thinks and he goes, and he tries her maiden name. And her maiden name comes up. That's a bad sign. That's a bad sign. Mostly because it's a surprise to him. It's not good. It's not great. When your wife doesn't tell you, she's going to start going by her maiden name and you have to find out. It doesn't bode well for their relationship, right?
Nothing like a hostage situation to get you back together.
Well, it seems to work out. Anyway, all of that is kind of the context to the scene we're about to watch. Now we might watch that again, but just from the top, somebody give us like a couple sentence summary of what we just watched. What happened? How's it start?
She said that she missed him.
Yeah, like they're it seems like they're reconciling, right?
Yeah.
She's like, the kids would like to have you, and he kind of he goes lower register, and he's like, they want to.
Yeah, but she offered him to sleep in the spare bedroom, not like share.
Well, but spare bedroom is a hell of a lot different than like 2 or 3 hours away or whatever it's going to be, right? So it seems like
kind of getting somewhere.
yeah, and then they get interrupted, and you're like, damn it! And she brings it back. She doubles down. She's like, I missed you. And she kind of whispers it in that way. That's like, oh. What does he do?
I missed my last name, asshole.
Oh, how does he? Do you remember how he puts it? It's not just that.
Is that when you're writing checks?
Oh, dude, it was going so well. It was going so well. And by the way, just to be clear, we're going to talk about why he does that because it's like, why did you do that? Why is he even in California? Do you guys think? Why is he out here?
He misses his wife
and family, right? Now, on the surface, you say he's visiting because he is doing that. That's not an inaccurate verb. But what do you think he's really out here to do?
He wants to bring her home to New York.
Or something. He wants to figure this shit out. He wants to make it work, right? He flew to a side of the country. He knows nobody. He knows one guy. He doesn't even know the name of the fucking town that guy lives in, right? Like he's here to try to fix this. And then he does that. That's interesting to me. That's curious, right? That's an odd decision. Not least of which because what happens after that? Like they get kind of interrupted again. Her Holly's secretary comes in. He's like, you got to talk to the troops. That's interesting. We can talk about that if you like. Holly leaves. What happens after that?
He cracks his head off the door.
Yeah, he calls himself real mature. Basically, fucking dumbass. Like, what does he realize?
That he messed up.
Well, it's like, then why? It's such an unforced error, right? There's no reason to do that. There's none. Especially when you see how he reacts. It's like, so you did a thing you didn't want. Why? He could have said nothing. He could have done nothing. And she's sewing it up for him, right? You're good. Why? Okay. So we've raised some questions now about the scene, about what's going on. We're going to watch it one more time. And with this stuff in the air now, I just want you guys thinking about anything you notice. And again, the laundry list I kind of gave you. Anything somebody says, anything somebody does, how things look, because this is a visual medium. Anything at all you notice that's just interesting for one reason or another. But we're going to watch it again.
Oh.
All right. We're going to come to Natasha here in a moment because I don't want her to forget whatever she had. But first, I want to ask, because it's an important question. What are they fighting about? What are they fighting about? It's a very specific thing.
The last name thing.
Huh?
The last name thing.
I would say that's a symptom.
Their marriage.
It's something to do with their marriage,
She moved.
their idea of marriage. One thing I want to point out to you, and then I'm going to let you guys do most of the rest of the work. Their conversation, let's not call it a conversation, their fight that they're having. They're bickering back and forth, and they're talking over each other. It's really well done. Like, they're acting really well, just talking over each other. It's exactly how fights go. If you don't know that. But anyway, he says, no matter the consequences for us or our marriage, and she's like, it just changed, like, and I'm paraphrasing, sorry, but like, what you thought our marriage should be, something like that. He's like, you have no idea, blah, blah. The whole time, she's not looking at him. She's playing with shit, like, nervously on her desk. She's like, and he says that, you have no idea what my idea of our marriage should be. And she looks right at him. I know exactly what your idea of our marriage should be. Fuck. That was a nerve. That was the thing. What she wants out of their marriage as opposed to what he wants out of their marriage seems to be two different things. That's an issue. That's a real issue. And granted, we've only looked at this scene today, but you watched that video, right? You know a little bit about the kind of guy McClane is, although there's more to be said about that. But from right here, what do you guys think either one of these characters want when it comes to their marriage? What do you think McClane wants versus what do you think Holly wants? Those are different things, apparently.
It doesn't seem like Kirway wants her to have like a career.
Why do you think that is?
I guess just given the time period, like wife
Yeah.
stays home, man works.
When you think about it, you'd say he's about 40, something like that, thereabouts. This is 1988. That would mean he was born in 1948-ish. Now, you don't remember those first couple of years, okay? But, so he's grown up in the 50s and or 60s. That's your worldview. You guys grew up in the early 2000s. That's your worldview. That's where you came up. Like, the world has always been like this. It's been no other way, because that's what you know. So you have this guy with, we'll say likely at this stage, 50s and or 60s masculine sensibilities, right? I say likely because we'd have to speak to that more. We couldn't just say, well, his 80s, you know. But what does that look like? That kind of masculinity when it comes to a marriage, when it comes to a wife.
He's like very much the boss of that relationship.
The head of the household, you'll hear that phrase, right?
Breadwinner, all that stuff.
Breadwinner, very good, very good. And it does seem to stick in his craw because it comes up right before this. The idea of her career, like she's saying she had to do that, it's an opportunity she had to take. That seems to kind of piss him off a little bit. Why?
It kind of seemed like a whole like, oh well, what about me thing?
Yeah, well, and we'll come to that, but we might have to work to it in a roundabout way. Why? What's the issue with her having a career for him and his idea of marriage? Do you think?
She's more successful than him.
Possibly. I mean, probably, all things considered, and just in terms of finances, right, and power. He's a New York City cop. I mean, he's not, but she's in charge of people and stuff.
And it also means she doesn't need him.
She's independent. Yeah. She's been on the West Coast. She's been on the other side of the country for 6 months or however long it is. She seems okay. Right? Yeah. You could also argue, signified with the name change, that's a way to like indicate some independence, right? With the maiden name business, Why doesn't he like that though?
Because I guess in his like worldview aspect, like the wife needs the husband to take care of her.
He wants her to be dependent. Yeah.
Because that makes him feel needed.
Well, and powerful. Empowered would be a better term. He's in charge. I think you kind of alluded to this earlier, but now we've better defined what that actually means, right? According to his pretty old school worldview in terms of masculinity, more specifically marriage and how it's meant to work, she can have her job. That's how all this started. She got a job. And I guess he was all right enough with that. But that job, he tells Argyle in an earlier scene, turned into a career. Those are different things. Some of you have jobs right now. I would be shocked if any of you have a career. Those are different things. That's all right. You're not supposed to have a career yet. Once it became a career, that came with all kinds of other things. That became a problem. And it all stems from she's not dependent upon him. He's not even necessarily the head of the household. She's more successful. Talking about power now. He doesn't like that. He doesn't like that. And that helps us kind of solve what her idea of a marriage should be, right? But we could do it really quickly. They're different apparently. What do you think Holly's idea of a marriage is?
Kind of like a partnership instead of a reliability thing.
Partnership? What is somebody over here?
I think they want. She wants to be more intimate because I think when he came into town,
Yeah.
he got a whole hotel. Like they were supposed to be together, but he got another hotel bunking in with somebody else.
Huh?
He was bunking in with somebody else.
He's going to. Yeah.
She was asking, like, why don't you just use a spare room?
She wants their family together, right? On the one hand, it's pretty clear when she doubles down and says, "I missed you." When she says it like that, it's like, oh, she wants to. All right, man. Okay, good for you guys. That's great. Good for them. But before all that, she also just wants their family together. You can hear Christmas music in the background. I make the argument in the video, and I'm going to make it throughout. Some people don't think this is a Christmas movie. I think those people are silly. It's very much a Christmas movie. And one of the things about Christmas movies is the reunification of a family. You think about every Christmas movie you've ever seen. I mean this. Always, it somehow starts with the family's broken, the family's not together, dad works too much, he's going to get visited by elves, like something's going to happen, right? And by the end of the movie, they're all going to go, family is what matters. So she starts with that message. But then she shifts to more what you're talking about, which is like, right, so there's that too, for sure.
I think there were people like they barged in. They were about to make love.
They were.
So
Well, and if you're not sure, we see them here in a couple minutes when the terrorists come in. They kick open the door and it's like, oh, there's those people doing what they were trying to do. And I haven't forgotten about you, by the way, Natasha. But we'll talk about this real quick and then I'll come to Natasha. No pressure. What's the deal with those people barging in?
She looks at them and then looks at them and says, "I miss you."
Oh, so you're kind of
That's kind of
Somebody like when they're young.
Yeah.
That's fair. No, that's not a bad. That's one way to read that. One way to read that from Holly's perspective is young love, impetuous, the kind of crazy thing you would do when you're young. You're like, let's just fucking hear. That's what happens. That's what that is. And Holly's like, and what's interesting I think you could argue that's how she reads that, and that necessitates her response. McLean also sees them barge in. I think he reads it
Yeah,
differently.
he reads it like, that's maybe what you're doing.
Do I know?
That's maybe what you're doing. That's why you change your name.
No. Look, because there's kind of. No, you can. I mean, I see what you're saying, based upon what we said about his worldview, maybe. But I think there's a stronger argument we could make. We keep saying they barge in. I said earlier they interrupt them. They do. They do. Let's think about them as a metaphor for just a second. On the one hand, for Holly, they're a metaphor for young love and impetuosity? You guys don't know. And all that stuff, right? They are. I think they're a different metaphor for McLean. Because again, you also think about what his response is with the name and the checks and all that stuff. He goes a totally different route. What led her to change her name, if you're McLean? How did that happen?
The company is the Japanese.
Yes. Who barges in? Who are they? We don't know anything. We don't even know their names.
Their employees.
Fuckers working at this company. That corporate world that poisoned his marriage comes barging in, interrupts. They can't even have a damn conversation, right? I think that's how he reads it. And that's one of the things anyway that leads to the very different responses. But you could link also those to their worldviews. He's more given to read it like that because what he's interested in here is power. She's more given to read it the way that you guys are talking about because she's more interested in partnership. You know, it's one of the, if you're talking about power dynamic, you're talking somebody's in charge, somebody isn't. If you're talking about a partnership, you're still talking about power, but now you're talking about sharing it, right? All of that happens in the 5 seconds before and after those people barge in, right? Now, Natasha, I'm so sorry. I keep kind of putting you on the back burner. What did you have?
I was just going to mention about the music during that scene.
Yeah.
How it was just like so quiet when they were talking, but
Mm.
it started getting louder when the other people interrupted.
Yeah, well, the office is super insulated, like they're safe here. Which is interesting, again, because McLean is very uncomfortable being in this building, being near it, talking to people here. This is not a world he belongs in, right? So he's not just this like old school masculinity, he's like blue collar masculinity, if you know, kind of like Fairchild, we talked about those. He's one of those guys type of thing. All these people in suits, it weirds him out. But this is a safe space, even sonically. You hear the Christmas music and that's nice ambiance, but the only time you hear any real noise is when somebody opens that door, right? Also tells you more about Holly's sort of level of success because she's in an office where you can't hear anything. I'll tell you one thing, I hear everything in my office. Some of you guys are loud. Other things you guys know.
The lady that told her to talk to the troops,
Yeah.
was she looking at him because he's dressed like that?
Well, yeah, the secretary. We'll talk about, so two things there. Maybe. But also because he's very clearly pissed. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Annoyed.
yeah, well, when you walk into, I don't know if you've ever had this pleasure, if you walk into a room where people are fighting, and you're like, oh no, like you just pick up on it, you feel that. I think there's that too. I think that's going on too. She recognizes, I just made things worse probably. We're going to talk about dress though in a second. That's very good. You have a hand up, sir.
Yeah, at the beginning of the scene when he's like, Ellis is like eyeballing you and stuff. It seems
Yeah.
It already seemed like he was kind of confrontational from the get-go.
Well, I mean, he says it in a way.
But it implies like a lack of trust, that he doesn't trust her.
Maybe. I mean, again, I think it says more about their worldviews generally. Like, if we return to what we were saying about those people barging in, they take that information and they interpret it very differently. He says, I think Ellis has his eye on you. What is he communicating about how guys work versus how women work? Ellis has his eye on you. Why does he say that?
He wants to fuck her.
Yeah. Why does he notify her of that?
See her response, what she would say to him.
Well, and to like warn her, right? You gotta watch out. This guy's implying that it might work, right?
Yeah. stupid woman to figure it out.
Well, I mean, you got to be careful. You don't want to take it too far, but we're at the very least saying he's trying to protect her with his knowledge. That's the role he wants to play, right? Do you guys remember her response?
I got an eye on like his private bathroom.
I'm taking that bitch's office. That's her worldview. She's like, no, I got this. Furthermore, I'm going to get him. Don't even worry about it. Again, very different worldviews. He's like, I have to protect you. She's like, somebody needs to protect that motherfucker. Yeah. Okay. Modes of dress. I do want to talk about this for a second. And we got a great one here. If you remember Holly, she's in a very 80s suit.
Power woman.
Yeah, she's got the shoulder pads. That was the thing. That's going on. The hair, all of it. I love her secretary's hair. It's very like bird recently shot, you know, like kind
Like the
of.
seagulls. Yeah.
but it's all sophisticated. It's all moneyed. Okay. Conversely, by the way, he's gonna look like this through the rest of the movie. You know. What's he look like?
He's in like this loungewear.
Loungewear is a very fancy way to talk about it, but sure, he's very, very casual, as opposed to formal, which is what everybody else looks like, right?
Kind of just like he doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, he looks like a dad on a couch, right? I mean, really, that's kind of what he is through the whole movie. Again, he kind of represents those people in this space where they don't belong. You even think about all the issues the terrorists have. They're like, who is this fucking guy? He's not supposed to be here. Exactly. He's not supposed to be here. He is not part of the plan because he's not part of this world. Even his dress tells you that. This is a middle-class uniform, is what he's wearing through the whole movie. He's not even going to have shoes. You know what I'm saying? It's like legit, there's a raccoon in the backyard, and your dad gets up, he doesn't put his shoes on. He's like, fucking God. He just walks out there. That's what he looks like. We could say more about that, but I just want to bring it to your attention because it's going to figure in the movie. He gets dirty throughout the movie. Like, you're going to see the action in the movie wear on him in ways that you don't typically see in these films, right? You do nowadays, kind of. But to this point in time, I don't know how familiar with 80s action you are. Dudes will just blow shit up and they'll be fine.
Yeah.
You know? Things like this. He's not. Okay. Also, real quick, what time is it? I mentioned I don't have a clock. 11:40. It's like 1:40. Oh, God. Anything else you guys notice in this scene? This is pretty good. Okay. I'm trying to think of anything else I want to bring to your attention. That was good. You guys did a great job, actually. That's good enough. All right. The other scene I want to make sure we look at. It is probably the most famous scene in the film. McClane has figured out a way to get a hold of the cops. It was difficult. They don't believe him. That's a whole other sort of sub-theme in the movie we don't have time to talk about today. But there's also questions of power in terms of who's in control, like who has authority. Hans has authority in the building because guns, okay? But he's also pulling the strings outside the building. And it's because, I would put to you, because he understands the playbook. He understands how authority is going to respond to the information he gives them. So it's very easy to trick, right? And even though McClane goes around that plan sometimes, like the cops aren't supposed to be here yet, right? McClane figures out a way, get the cops there. If you remember, the dispatcher does not believe him, even though there's gunfire on the call. She's like, it's probably just a prank. And we're like, what is happening? Why will no one believe this guy's getting shot at?
This is America.
Well,
Facts don't happen here.
Well, the problem, and again, I'm using my memory, and I hope you can follow me here. The whole time, the dispatcher, when he's calling 911, is mad at him that he's not using the proper channels. He's doing it on a walkie-talkie. He's using a police channel. She's like, you gotta get off this channel. And he's like, please, come help. And she's like, if you want help, you'll have to call. And he's like, God damn it. So often, it's a question of going through the proper channels, doing what you're supposed to do. And Hans has gotten rid of those. You can't do those, right? That's part, because again, he knows how that's how it works. but time and time again in the movie, people in positions of power will either get tricked or make a bad mistake because they keep operating under the assumption that they're in control when they're not. Han's included, by the way, but that doesn't happen until the end. Spoilers. All right. Anyway, Al, he happens to be nearby, and they're like, "Look, hey man, you're close. Just go see. It's probably nothing. All right." They start shooting at him because McClane drops a body on his car. Okay, so he's pretty up. He knows something's up now. Okay, they start shooting at him. He calls in other people. They're going to believe him because he's part of the power structure. He's a cop. They don't know that McClane is yet. That's where we're at. The scene we're going to watch, though, is immediately after this. McClane has that walkie-talkie, and he's finally going to converse with Hans. This is the antagonist and the protagonist in the film. This is their meeting. All right. Same rules apply. Anything at all that you notice. All right. So just like we started with the last one first, what happens in this scene? How's it start?
John calls him on the radio.
Yeah, Hans is in an office with his henchman. McClane calls on the walkie-talkie. No one happens. They have a conversation.
Yeah. It's a weird like power struggle.
Yeah, they're taunting each other. Hans kind of tries to insult him, and that's kind of it, right? All right. Did you guys notice anything? First of all, anything stand out to you?
I thought the part where he was like, you just noticed to the movies you watch was interesting.
What about those? Do anybody remember
It's
those?
like John Wayne, cowboy movies.
He says John Wayne. He says somebody else too. Rambo. That's a whole spectrum, you know. What kind of movies are those?
Action movies.
Action movies, right? And it's weird sometimes to think of like old westerns as action movies, but that's what those are. That's what they were like back then. What's he trying to say about McClane here?
He's kind of like his element.
Al,
He's trying so hard.
do I know?
He's trying so hard.
Kind of. Why bring up John Wayne or Rambo in this conversation, do you think?
Stereotypical American youth.
Yeah. What do you say, Spawn?
That's how he's like appeared. That's his appearance that he was on.
Well, I mean, to be totally fair, Hans doesn't know what he looks like yet, right?
He's trying
And-
to be, I'm sorry.
Here you go.
He's trying to be save the day.
He's trying to be a hero.
Yeah.
Like who?
John Wayne.
John Wayne and Rambo. Hans is trying to insult him here. What's he trying to say?
Those people aren't real.
He's like, you think you're in a movie, which of course is fun for us because it's like, oh, it is a movie. What's going on? But yeah, for Hans, who is not in a movie, because that's, just follow me there. He's saying, you think you're in one of these movies. You're not. Why does he say that? How do those movies usually go?
They end up killing the bad guy and a bunch of other people and happy ending.
Yeah, yeah. That's not how life works. Not real life, right? We're not in a movie. Bad guys win all the time, unfortunately. And he's like, yeah, that's what's going on here. So like, you're screwed. But he's telling me he's delusional. He's saying you think you're a hero. More to the point, you think you're an action hero. And we in the audience are like, oh shit, he is, isn't he? I wonder what's going to happen. So that's interesting, that they're pointing to the fact that it's a movie here. And they bring up its cinematic heritage, right? That should set off alarm bells for you. In some way, shape, or form, this movie is in conversation with those other movies. This movie is taking those on. What those movies do, this movie is going to do something a little bit different. To be totally fair, I assume most of you have not seen the first Rambo. It's actually super different too, but that's for another day. Anyway, anything else you guys notice here?
I kind of smirked when he picked up the C4.
Well, and he goes, whoa, because it's
Weapon of mass destruction.
things just got serious too, right? He's kind of rifling cigarettes, he's making jokes, and then he goes, whoa, and he forgets to turn off the radio. So Hans hears that, whoa, right? The rest of the conversation, McClane is very cool about it. But that one moment, he's like, oh. Right? Okay. Anything else? Can you guys think of more of their conversation? Because that's really what this is. This is a lot of conversation in this scene.
At first, he mentioned like him being a security guard.
He takes a swing. He's like, maybe a security guard we didn't account for. How does McClane respond to that?
And wrong, double jeopardy.
Like a game show. And again, in context, I love Hans's facial expression there. He's like, who the fuck is it? We're gonna shoot you, dude. This is not the time for haha. You know, like, yeah. So it's telling you something about Hans. And by the way, Hans is operating from, it tells you with the security guard thing, he tells you with the you think you're in a movie thing. Hans is operating from a position of what's most likely. What are the narratives that are in place? That's how he's built his whole plan. And it almost works, by the way. The problem is McClane doesn't fit that plan. McClane hits him with game show references, you know.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
We're going to talk about that in a second. We are. It's important, actually. He hits him with Roy Rogers. Do you know who Roy Rogers is?
No.
Real quick. He's not John Wayne. Oh. How is Chrome not on the... Here. This guy. That's Roy Rogers. He's not John Wayne. He doesn't even have a gun. Oh, no, he does. Okay, he does. He does right there. I'm sorry. He's kind of cheesy. You know? He's not an action hero. So why do you think, and this will be a struggle for a second, but it's important. Why do you think when Hans says, bankrupt American culture, saw too many movies as a kid, you think you're John Wayne, you think you're Rambo, why do you think McClane goes, I'm probably more like Roy Rogers, actually? Why do you think this is the guy he comes at him with? Why do you think that is? Okay, let's talk this out. In a way, it's a little bit similar to the scene we watched with Holly and McClane, right? These guys have two different worldviews, and you're going to find out about that through how they kind of bounce off of each other, okay? What kind of guy is Hans? What kind of character is he?
Calculated.
Yeah.
Serious.
He's a serious? For sure. And again, we don't see him at the beach, right? He could be different. Probably not. But, you know, if you're taking over a building and you have hostages, you'd probably be pretty serious. You know?
Cold kind of indifferent.
Very cold.
White out.
Yes. He has tailored suits. Importantly, we don't always get to this. In the scene we just watched, he's sitting behind that desk. All his henchmen are around. He's the boss. I know we know that, but he's the corporate boss, right? Ellis, right before he gets blown away, makes the point that what Hans is doing really isn't so different from what Ellis does. Ellis does corporate takeovers, right? It's the same thing. He says, you use a gun, I use a pen. You know, he's not wrong. He's wrong in one respect, that one of those is a little more immediate because he gets shot in the face. But the point is, Hans is very much corporate. He represents that world. And that gets back to your cold, your serious, right? And again, just to keep the score updated, what's he doing this for?
He's trying to steal bonds from...
He's a thief. He's doing this for money. Half the movie, you're like, oh, he's a terrorist. He's not. He's a thief.
businessman.
He's a businessman. Yeah. So that's interesting. What else is he? He's deeply what? Stereotypically what?
Foreign.
Yeah.
He's like an 80s pro wrestling villain.
Yeah. I mean, you say he's German because that they gotta assign a country to it. He's just European and bad, mostly for that exact reason, right? Again, if you're comparing the two characters, Hans and McClane might as well be draped in a fucking flag. Hans doesn't look like us. He doesn't sound like us. He doesn't stand for us.
New York Street Cop.
Exactly. And again, what's interesting there, especially in the late 80s, with the rise of corporate America, it's interesting that our hero is a guy who flies in the face of that, right? The guy who represents us is the guy who doesn't have a shirt or shoes. How does he beat these bad guys? He doesn't go in guns blazing most of the time,
He
right?
goes through fucking air ducts.
Yeah, he sneaks around, he picks them off, it's through grit. He runs through glass. You know what I'm saying? Like, he earns it. He's a bootstraps hero. That's what we like to tell ourselves we do as a people. So he represents us stereotypically in that regard. Why do I bring any of this up? Because that's what they're talking about. Again, importantly, the deeply stereotypically European villain says, you're the product of a bankrupt American culture. That's a shot at us. Grew up watching too many movies. All of us did. Every single one of us grew up watching too many movies. I'm there. I beat Mario before I was 3. I know. That's not a brag. That's my parents didn't watch me. Okay? He says, you think you're John Wayne, you think you're Rambo. All of those are linked. So when he's insulting McClane in that scene, everyone in the audience is like, this motherfucker. Like, he's insulting us with those things. There's 2 ways you can respond to an insult generally. One of them is to dispute the claim. The other is what McClane does. Yeah, go ahead.
Is he being sarcastic? Does he know like Roy Rogers is cheesy?
I don't think so. I'm trying to think of an example to this, and this is hard because we can't really talk about, we'll say, disagreements that you guys have had with people. But one of the ways, if you can do it well, to kind of dismantle somebody else's insult of you is to agree with them. They will have no idea what to do with that information. Right? That's what McClane does. But the way this operates, because look, most people in some kind of way, you guys have heard of John Wayne. Do you really know who he is? Probably not. You've heard the name. That's kind of big. That guy's been dead for a long time. So that says something, right? People know who John Wayne is. People know who Rambo is. McClane hits him with a deep cut. He's like, nah, I'm Roy Rogers, actually. None of you knew who that was. There's at least a decent chance Hans doesn't know who that is. And now it's made even funnier because it's this guy. Okay? And that leads to yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. What time is it, by the way?
11:58.
Thank you. Let's talk about that. Now, I just kind of hopefully sold you on the idea that Hans is very much this like shadowy corporate European threat that like we're gonna stop because that's not our American values, right? These are the stories we tell ourselves. McClane, on the other hand, blue collar dad, old school masculinity. Oh, we left a part out we got to come back to about that scene. I just wanted. But he kind of stands for us in a lot of ways in this movie, right? And he agrees with Hans. He says, all those things are probably true. They're even more true than you think. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. What?
Because it doesn't matter, I'm still gonna kill you.
On the one hand, yeah, there's very much a sense of menace, like I'm coming for you. The last words you hear might be yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Imagine that. Let's break that down. It's a two-word phrase there. Yippee-ki-yay. Where does that come from? That's pretty easy.
Shitty Western movie.
This guy. He says stuff like that. Yippee-ki-yay. As an old Western cowboy thing, you know? It makes sense. If you're on a horse, you got a hat, you say stuff like that. Okay. So again, he's agreeing with Hans. He's like, yeah, sure, I'm one of those guys, whatever. Motherfucker's different. I don't think this guy says that. What is that about? Do you think? Motherfucker. What is that word?
Is there like a weird like class like thing? 'Cause like he's a businessman, he would never say motherfucker, but he's a street cop.
I think that's part of it. I think motherfucker stands for a certain kind of person that Hans is not. For sure. For sure. Especially the kind of conversation we're having. What does motherfucker mean here? It can mean different things, by the way. Context is important. If you walk into a room and you're like, hey, what's up, motherfucker? Like, what does that mean?
Hey dude, what's up?
It's dude. It means dude. You don't walk into a room with your buddies, you're like, hey, you fuck moms, right? Like, no. That's not what it means. My point here is words actually do change based upon context. This is important, all right? I love motherfucker. It's a great word. It's a great word. This is a different context. And again, he's still not saying, hey, Hans, you fuck moms. That's not what he's saying.
Like, oh, you fucking terrorist.
Yeah, it's a jab at him. But also, not just like lower class people say motherfucker, because that's probably true. Who else says motherfucker?
People like Rambo, after they kill somebody, they say stuff.
They say stuff like that. They will. They will. Roy Rogers, again, probably won't. Roy Rogers has also been dead for a long time. I don't know if you can tell. He's not alive. He's not alive right now. He's been dead for a long time. Who says motherfucker? We said it's not Hans. Why else is it not Hans? This is easier than you think.
It's easier than
Americans say motherfucker. That's an American phrase. We did not invent as many things as you might think we did. That's true. We're a new country in terms of like how old countries are. Our literature for the first 100 years was a bunch of guys going, can we write stuff? We keep reading British people. And they're like, but they got all the good stuff. It took us a while. Motherfucker is American. It is. And it's low class. It's a bootstraps phrase. When John McClane says yippee-ki-yay motherfucker, he's taken Roy Rogers and he's updating it. If Roy Rogers was in 1988 and he stood for all of us watching this movie against this European guy, he would put a motherfucker on the end of it.
So is that another thing that like kind of reaches out to the audience, like, hey, I'm one of you.
This is sort of class identification, but it's just outright fucking patriotism, I would say. It is. This is like a USA chant. Motherfucker. That's what it is. That's what it is in this moment. And I love making that point to you guys because most of you even now probably don't believe me.
Is that why that scene's so famous then?
Well, it's also just so quotable.
Yeah.
You've never in your life heard anybody say something like that. Yippee-ki-yay motherfucker. What? That's crazy. But yeah, probably a little bit of that. All right, very quickly. There's one more thing I want to return to because I forgot because you guys were doing so well. We were moving so fast. Dacario, will you get the lights for us? All right, yeah, we got time. I forgot to mention. It was my fault. We didn't even talk about at the end of the scene, the first scene we watched, where McClane is fighting with Holly. What happens after she leaves? That's really important. I'm really bummed I forgot to bring it up. Yes. Yeah, and he calls himself immature. So we spent all day today talking about how, like, kind of the pillars of McClane's personality. Old school masculinity, right? American, lower class, all those things. And it definitely informs like his idea of what their marriage should be as opposed to Holly's. she's a more modern woman. She wants that partnership. She wants some independence, like all these things that I think sometimes we even take for granted in 2022, right? But 1988, what did I say? Is 2 years younger than me, so it's over 30, dude. Then what's the deal after she leaves? He bangs his head, calls himself immature. What's that reaction about, do you guys think? There's a really easy interpretation. What does he realize immediately after she leaves?
Like, she should have said that.
He fucked up, for sure. But, like almost, if he just banged his head on the door jamb and like the scene ended, that kind of maybe be where that ends, right? It's the immature comment to me. Like, that's weird. He doesn't call himself an idiot. He doesn't say, oh, you really screwed up. He calls himself immature. Why do you think, like, what do you think that's about? That's weird.
I'm a man doesn't raise his voice. That's what a child does.
No.
I'm trying.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, that's probably something somebody told you. That's not true.
Is it how simple the situation is? Like, use just a name?
Well, I mean, look, to play devil's advocate for a minute, I totally get him being upset. Like, that's that's new information. He got surprised with the fact that his wife changed her name and everything that might entail. You can understand somebody being a little defensive, we'll say, about that, right? No, but it's, again, why does he say? He says it about himself, that he's immature, or he was immature. What was immature about what he did, do you think?
They were talking over each other.
They were.
And it just seemed kind of like petty. Like, she's working out, it's kind of getting better. It's like, oh, change your name.
So he's saying to himself after the fact, he should have been able to let it slide. Now again, granted, that's a tall order, if we're going to be fair to him, maybe fairer to him than he was. But he tells you in a really quick moment, he should have been able to let it go. I hate those people. Doesn't that kind of fly in the face of everything we've said about this guy?
Yeah.
That's freaking me out, that little kid.
She had a tiny piano.
All right. Let's talk about that real quick. His worldview, it makes sense. It makes sense that he would be upset with her name change, right? We get that for all the reasons we enumerated. Well, then what is this shift at the end of that scene? What is that? What do you think that tells you about him?
Is it that he's changing and adapting?
I think he's trying to. Unsuccessfully at the beginning of the movie. Yeah. But he's trying to. And I think that helps to fill you in a little bit on, again, what his real mission is coming out here.
He went swag.
Well, and he's trying to grow that whole immature thing.
Yeah, it kind of feels like a conversation. He's like, don't yell at her. Why when he's like in the elevator up in the office, like, keep it cool. You got it.
And try to, like, clearly she changed her name. This is important to her. I need to swallow that or whatever. I need to do a better job of getting over that. And he doesn't, and he calls himself out for it after the fact, right? What time is it, by the way?
It is 12:08.
Okay, God. Couple more things about it. What do you make of the fact that he doesn't do any of this until she leaves? That's interesting to me. If you go back and watch that scene, and we don't have time, he glares at her, and then as soon as that door closes, he starts hitting his head. He totally changes.
Trying to keep like a tough friend.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a dude. Dudes don't show emotion.
Well, but again, that's the way he
Grew up.
was or is, you know. And he, as soon as she leaves, he's like, "Oh, that's fucking stupid." It's like, would you just don't wait until the door shuts, right?
You don't want to lose the argument. When you do that, it looks like you lost the argument.
It does, but doesn't he kind of have to reconcile?
It's a pride thing.
What? And it is. It is.
No one wants to lose an argument.
No, but again, well, we can't just say nobody. We got to talk about McClane specifically. What about McClane specifically doesn't want to lose that argument?
He's a man's man.
Yeah.
I read through fucking Glass. I'm not gonna say I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, you say it like that. I mean, that's, yeah. But like, the kind of guy he is, and again, to be clear, that guy is also the kind of guy he's trying to change, I think, with the immature comment. He's trying to. Is also the thing that keeps him from fixing shit with his wife. Right? Because that guy can't lose the argument, that guy also can't let the name change slide. That guy has to say something about that name change. The point I'm making to you here is, it's interesting that even though McClane wants to consciously not be that guy, he is. Like, he can't help it. At least in this moment. Okay? That says a whole lot. Not just about, again, I always use BuzzFeed as an example because that's what I read crap like that when I'm trying to go to sleep. All those lists are terrible. We oversimplify this stuff. It's not just he's like toxically masculine in some ways or any goofy shit like that. It's the fact that it's in him and he can't just turn it off. It's not a switch. He wants to and he can't. That's interesting. Last thing I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to let you go. I know some of you are runner's stance, get ready to go to the door. He does change by the end of the movie. We're going to talk about this a little bit next time. Spoilers, after they kill Hans, that happens. Fun trivia about that next time too. He introduces Holly to Al, the guy he's been talking to the whole time. They haven't actually met. He says, oh, this is my wife, this is Holly Gennaro. He uses her last, he did it. Does anybody happen to recall what she says? What the fuck? Yeah. She goes, Holly McClane. And you're like, but the whole movie, he came out here, what happened? We're gonna talk about that next time. All right, also, I think, and this is me using my memory, I believe proposals are due next time. Here's all that means. Discussion post due today. I want you to do your best to try out some analysis. There is a video up. If you haven't looked at it, you should go look at it. But what we did today, dive into a scene, find some details that seem interesting to you, talk to me about it. Talk to each other about it. And then use that to the best of your ability by the time we meet next time to try to formulate an argument or arguments about the movie. And it's going to feel way more formal to you than it probably is because there's a prompt. That's just to try to get you going. That's all that's about, all right? Take a real swing at it. We're going to kind of start talking about the paper next time, but that's all I'm looking for. Does that make sense? Sweet. I'll see you then. Thank you.